So, Tomo-Chan as a Girl has come to an end after a solid 953 chapters, and the ending was meh. I mean, technically it resolved the conflict at the start of the story, but in a thoroughly uninspired way. Endings of stories don't determine their entire worth though, and Tomo-Chan has a lot of chapters before its ending. So then, ladies and gentlemen, let me answer the question, should you read Tomo-Chan is a Girl? The basic plot of Tomo-Chan is incredibly simple. Our protagonist, Tomo, confesses, "Jun, I love you." And Jun replies, "I love you too, bro." Which is obviously not the response she's looking for. The rest of the story, in theory, is then Tomo trying to get Jun to recognize her as a girl and get out of the friend zone. In practice, it could more accurately be described as well-written characters have funny scenes together. Because, for most of the story, there sure as hell isn't any progress made on the original premise. Now, why might you want to read Tomo-Chan? Well, the simple answer is, it's funny, and the characters are likable. Yay, two incredibly subjective things to explain. Well, explaining humor is tougher, so I'll procrastinate and address the characters first. Why do I like the main cast? For most of the manga I've read, all the characters seem to come from a small set of cookie-cutter personalities, and anytime I see a new character, I can pretty quickly figure out which cookie-cutter was used to make them. That's true with none of the characters here though. The best two examples are probably Carol and Misuzu, Tomo's two female friends. Carol always has an innocent smile on her face that gives off the impression of being a complete ditz, and to be fair, sometimes she is legitimately an idiot. That being said, she can also be oddly perceptive, knowing intuitively how to get under other people's skins and being absolutely impossible to argue with. Couple that with her contrasting, continually cheerful demeanor and incredibly blunt tongue, and what she does and says are both surprising and hilarious. Misuzu is Carol's foil, appearing cold and logical most of the time, and often intentionally manipulating the people around her. Her cool reactions to absurd situations are comedy gold. That being said, the people around her are so absurd that she often ends up playing the straight man to their antics, and her emotions slip through more than she would like. Both of these characters can end up being quite scary, to other people around them that is, not to the reader. As for the two main characters, Tomo and Jun, as much as I will complain about the way their romance progresses later in this video, the foundation of their relationship is solid. They've known each other for ages, their personalities match well, and they share loads of common interests. Hooray for relationships based on more than, "He did something nice for me 10 years ago that I never will forget," or, "Hey, this girl just fell into my life." Okay, onto the humor. This is going to be tough. So, I think it's reasonable to say that all the characters in the story have blind spots, shall we say, to reality. The most obvious is Jun not recognizing Tomo as a girl, but these blind spots extend to almost all the other characters. Then, seeing the characters act in a way that doesn't match with reality because of their own specific blind spots is hilarious. Some of this is slapstick, but so much more of it is situational humor and just seeing other characters' reactions to various insanities that are said and that occur. Humor is also generated from the bluntness of certain characters' actions. Jun, Carol, and Misuzu all say and do things that I'd love to do myself but could never get away with. And seeing them do them in such a straightforward manner is pretty funny. Finally, I just love all the quirks of the characters, from Tomo's casual lack of common sense, to Misuzu's blatant evil scheming, to protective Jun. And the way these quirks interact is wonderful to watch. I know the saying, "It's not funny if I have to explain it," but hopefully this should at least give you an idea of why Tomo-Chan has stellar comedy. All the good stuff out of the way, let's talk about the bad. Well, as I already mentioned, the author of Tomo-Chan is really bad at developing romance in a realistic way. Or scratch that, bad at developing romance in general. First, the romance sees no forward progress whatsoever for hundreds of chapters. Then, when it does see forward progress, there's some completely arbitrary roadblocks that get thrown in the way. At a certain point, it just feels like the author is trying to drag out the series as long as possible. Finally, how the romance is resolved feels at odds with the rest of the story. As a warning now, spoilers coming up in this video, though given that you shouldn't be reading the story for the plot, I wouldn't worry about it. Anyways, the last 24 chapters are spent on a fight scene between Jun and Tomo's dad, which would be perfectly alright if this series was an action shonen mixed with romance, like something like Change 123, but this series is a romantic comedy. You don't read it for the action, and quite frankly, the author isn't particularly good at drawing action. Actually, the author's background drawing hentai doujins before this probably means he's good at drawing some type of action, but not this type. The series shines when all its characters are bouncing off each other, and to that end, I would have liked it to keep bouncing them off each other, in a figurative sense, all the way to the conclusion, rather than a literal one. I mean, the author wrote such a good prologue for Tomo and Jun's relationship. It's disappointing he couldn't write a good conclusion. All that being said, would I recommend reading Tomo-Chan as a girl? As a romance? No. As a comedy? Absolutely 100% yes. And generally, once again, yes, you should read it. Although I'm not a fan of how the story was ended, the ending point itself wasn't bad, and the journey up to that point was great. I really hope the author, Yanagida Fumita, publishes another series that isn't 18+, because I would really like to read something else from him that isn't a doujinshi. On that note, if you've already read Tomo-Chan as a girl and are looking for something similar, I would recommend Muso Telepathy, another hilarious 4-koma romantic comedy with quirky characters. Its art isn't quite as nice, but the development of the romance is so very much better. Anyways, thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed the video. Cheers!